Hi there traders, this is Steve Miley, the market chartist, again going into the Forex zone for FX Explained, and we're going to take a look at the major currency pairs in it. We're going to take a look at the Euro, the Pound, the Australian, New Zealand and Canadian and dollars, and the Japanese yen, all against the US dollar. Now if you like what you see here, don't forget to hit the like button there on our YouTube channel, and subscribe as well to the YouTube channel if you want to see some more great content from FX Explained. So let's take a look first of all at the Euro versus the dollar. So we've had this really strong uptrend in here, started from early April and developing over the last 2 weeks. Importantly, more recently, taking out this important resistance area here, 119.4750 area. Now that's allowed for a much more secure base. You can see the market more recently defending these uptrend lines that come from the beginning of April and prodding up here to 119.95 at the very end of last week into mid-April. Now we've got this critical area here of peaks. Now we're prodded above these peaks here, 119.89, 119.90. There's also an important impulse level there at 120.01. So the market's gone into this resistance area between 119.89 and 120.01 up to 119.95, and right at the end of last week was somewhat cautious, but it's holding above this trend line and still leaves lots of upside threats in here to fully take out this resistance area. That would then shift the intermediate term out to a lot more bullish and then open up risk for much higher price action towards maybe 121.13 and even maybe towards 122.43 for the second half of April and then going on into May. So upside pressure certainly for the euro versus the dollar. A lot of this is now as the vaccination process is starting to play catch up with the UK and the US throughout Europe. So some positivity coming through from the euro in here. It's also to do with US yields in here, so we'll talk about that as we go forward. Let's take a look at the pound versus the dollar now. So we look at cable pound dollar. Now not anywhere near as a positive a tone in here. The market in here much more sideways in here, actually falling throughout early April and then sideways. So the pound not really able to re-energize. We had this really strong uptrend from the beginning of the year. That was all on the great rollout of the pound, for the UK on its vaccination program, and that's really helped the pound higher in here. However, subsequently the market has been has moved lower from late March through early April, and then has been the last week in here slight rebound. But we still see the negative pressures from this sell-off from late February, the sell-off in here, late February throughout March, and we're looking for downside pressures to come back through. Now above 138.66 and 139.19 would certainly ease negative pressures, but at the moment we're looking for a rollback low. So the pound staying more negative in here as that positivity from the vaccine program is very much been built in. Let's go and take a look at the commodity currencies now in here in the dollar block, what we call the dollar block. We're going to kick off with the Australian versus the US dollar in here. So if we look at Aussie versus US in here, we've had a really strong rebound. We've created either a triple bottom down here, or more likely what we see is an inverse head and shoulders in here with the two shoulders, 1 and 2, and then the head down here. So we're looking for this inverse head and shoulders pattern, signaled by the break above this here, the neckline resistance. Okay, so just redraw that neckline resistance. But we broke above the neckline resistance last week, and also reversed this downtrend that comes from the late February peak. So reversed above this downtrend, and that has secured a really strong base for the Aussie versus the US dollar. Now this has been helped by the fact that we get broad US dollar weakness translating into we're seeing broad US dollar weakness versus the euro, versus the yen, and now versus the commodity currencies. That's translated into a more positive tone for the commodity currencies. The belief in the reflation trade, a stronger move for commodities in here over the last week to the upside, oil and copper pushing significantly higher, and that's helped these commodity currencies higher. So Aussie's pushed up in here, broken these trendline resistance and the neckline resistance, established a base around 77.02, 76.94, and all the risk is higher for the second half of this month, up towards 78.49 for April. And it's a similar story for the Kiwi dollar in here. So we take a look at the Kiwi dollar, not quite the same bottoming pattern in here, but you've got a bottoming pattern established, and then a strong platform down here around 70.00, 69.95 support established, and then to punch up a really strong recovery last week to reverse again the downtrend line that comes from late February and through this mid-March peak, accelerating up through this trend line, through the resistances here at 70.69.70, and again that's setting up upside risk, and we see real threat to this peak here from mid-March at 72.69 again into the second half of the month. And finally, amongst the commodity currencies, let's take a look at the US dollar versus the Canadian dollar. And again in here, strong recovery in here, actually from mid-March in here for the US dollar versus the Canadian dollar, but then we've seen that fading in here through April. So US dollar, Canadian dollar, now we've got a succession of lower lows and lower highs. The market unable more recently to take out this peak here at 126.47 from late March, failing twice here in early April at 126.35 and 126.31. And now that US dollar weakness that we're seeing across the board coming through for the Canadian dollar, also being helped by the oil price popping back higher in here, helping the Canadian dollar higher. So dollar CAD moving lower, reverse this trend line here that comes up from the mid part of March. So dollar CAD also pointing lower in here, again US dollar weakness coming through. And we're going to finish off talking about the dollar yen, and whilst we're talking about dollar yen, I'll talk a little bit about yield. So I'm going to switch this actually to a daily chart to see some of the back history in here. So but what we're seeing in here is, again, dollar weakening from the very end of March throughout April in here. And a big part of this dollar weakening has been, particularly in the last week, as we've seen a push to lower yields in the US. Okay, so previously we had a big surge to higher yields across the US, and that surge to higher yields has seen the US dollar strength that we've seen for much of this year. However, and there we see it on dollar yen right away from the beginning here, higher yields taking the dollar higher. But we've seen in the last 2 to 3 weeks the yields go more sideways in the US, and in the last week we've seen the yields go back lower. So lower yields translating into dollar weakness, and that's what we've seen across the board. We've already seen it previously with the euro, but then more so in here now, more recently with over the last couple of weeks against the yen, and then in the last week, as we just shown there, against the Aussie, the Kiwi, the CAD. The pound's the only one that's really not getting a strong rebound against the dollar at the moment. So we've seen in here dollar yen pushing down through supports, creating this topping pattern, and if it breaks down through 108.30.29 support in here for dollar yen, then that looks a lot weaker, particularly if that's met with also a reversal down through this uptrend line that comes from the beginning of the year. So generally speaking, we've got, just to do a quick recap in here, dollar weakness across the board, except really against the pound. The pound still looks to me vulnerable against the dollar. So we're looking for downside for pound, but mostly looking for downside across the board for the dollar. And then in particular, we're seeing Aussie and Kiwi, particularly in here, have strong moves higher, impulsive moves higher last week, and looking for those to extend, and looking for that grind high that we've seen in the euro to continue. Okay, I'm going to wish you all a great trading day. Please, again, don't forget to hit that like button if you like what you see here. And also, don't forget then, if you're not yet subscribed to the YouTube channel, do hit that subscribe button. I'll be back with you for another Forex Zone very soon. Take care, stay safe. So traders, don't forget to catch us again on the Forex Zone, and also check out all the great content on fxexplain.co.uk.